Hello and welcome, Exiles, to the armor stack variation of the Luminary Merc bot. And after yesterday, now one of the few builds who has completed Blasted Monolith, up there next to the Strength Stackers, the Armor Stackers, the Reverse Snapshot, Penance Branded Dissipation builds. There's not many builds that have completed this map, but now Mercbot is one of them. And thanks to that, we're going to see some Gary's Reserve on Connor's stream, potentially Rutu's stream, and obviously we saw some on my stream because Aloha also completed Blasted Monolith with a Face Breaker Luminary. And I have to say props to him. That was a very, very good build. And as much as I hated his use of Svalin, it was one of the correct scenarios to use Svalin in, where you don't really need that much defense to do a regular feared with Delirious, so you might as well go min-max some avoidance so you can inch out some more damage on your character. So props to him. As much as I hate that shield for how overpriced I think it is, that was a pretty good use case. Now, let's go ahead and talk about this character, how it works, and a bit about our character's passive points. Most importantly, I want to take note of the fact that I did Blasted Monolith yesterday with 3 Ascendancy points. Before, when I was setting up the character, I was testing out how much difference it made to put a unique Formless Flame and Untouched Soul onto my Merc. I didn't end up using this. I decided to go with Light Radius. However, I forgot to respec the nodes to put them back in. So these nodes give for my character with our Flame Link and how much we're getting from a high amount of aura effect on Anger. These nodes are about 25 to 30% more damage. Would it have mattered? Maybe. We almost lost the map. I don't think it really was the deciding factor, though. Ultimately, the map, the reason it came down so late in the timer is because there was just one rare in a corner that I ran past like 4 times, and I had to go review the footage to try to find where it was with my last few portals as I was scrambling to find a last rare. Once we did, map was cleared and we were good to go. But kind of funny nonetheless that I had these nodes selected in this whole setup where I was doing all this min-maxing. I forgot a very, very important piece to respec. Now, talking about this briefly is I actually think this is probably potentially a better way to go or comparable way to go, which is using Formless Flame and Untouched Soul. On our Merc, you'll see it has about almost 1 million armor. And then if we put on these items here, the Merc gets, right now it's like 22% more armor. Keep in mind, that's with a Untouched Soul that has a 12% roll. This is no quality, no volatile val. If this was like an 18 all res Untouched Soul, then this would be closer to like a 1.4, and it'd be more like 40% more armor is the difference we'd be seeing if I actually had a properly rolled Untouched Soul, which I do not. Now, I think that's a considerable option, but I'm going to talk about why I did what I did and some of the nuance to the situation. So, Frostblade's Mercenaries return requires a certain amount of proj speed to get consistent. From my testing, this requires not only the proj speed enchant, the unveil proj speed. Not only does it require long shot anoint, but it actually requires a little bit more. It requires the glove mod that gives you a roll range where projectiles are randomly selected to have 50% more to 50% less proj speed, so it rolls in that range. That takes you to around the max roll being around 150 proj, which is around the speed you need for the Frostblades to return. However, this is very RNG that you top roll the more speed. It doesn't happen very often. And from my testing, there is a way to make it consistent as hell, which is instead of adding Lethality and Twin Terrors as annoyance, you could add in Vengeance Cascade and Ballistics. So another 20% proj speed with a giga proj speed increase for the returns. And that makes it very consistent for the return to give you that extra hit. However, this is only necessary for a very big arena with no walls like Exarchs. Or like Cirrus. Arenas like that where there's so much space, there's no walls, that's where you need the proj speed. In my use case, which was beating Blasted Monolith has a lot of walls. The feared members can spawn next to walls. I figured, I'd rather not invest into these extra proj speeds for the scenario where I'm fighting monsters that are in areas with a bunch of walls. So, TLDR is, if you want consistent returns with large scenarios like a lot of the boss arenas, then you probably need to change out the Twin Terrors and Lethality for those proj anoints that I mentioned for consistency on return. You'll still get some returns with this when you get top roll 50% more, but obviously the roll range is a 1 in 100 to top roll type of thing, so it's not very consistent at all. But if you have those proj speed anoints, that's how you get the consistency. Another thing I want to note here is this is also very expensive. Corrupting a rare Stranglegasp is a pretty pricey item. So in contrast, going for Unique Formless Flame and Untouched Soul, if you're doing this on any sort of reasonable budget, this would be much cheaper. You do get some of the crit chance back via things like a +1 power charge corruption on Formless Flame. Also, you can get the Foulborn version of this helmet, which doesn't have minus fire res, so it helps you get even more increased armor from the mod. And there is the additional option of you can vestigial this item. I'm not sure if that's actually worth it. I didn't go too much through the unique helmet pool. I'm not sure if there's some unique helmets that justify going for the vestigial over this. There might be, but I think it'd be questionable. So yeah, anyways, that's just talking a bit about the unique nodes that I forgot to respec on the actual run. The nodes I meant to use were this light radius nodes, which would have given me about 25% more damage. And I would recommend maybe trying out both options, as I think they're roughly comparable. You do get 8% more damage per unique item your Merc is wearing via this node here. So it is fairly comparable / maybe even more damage, especially if you're not trying to do the returns. Honestly, if you don't care about the return stuff, I would consider going for a high roll Untouched Soul and Formless. I think that might still be the correct play. Another thing I want to take note of here is you'll notice on my character, I'm not wearing rings. This was specifically for completing Blasted Monolith. Rings are the lowest value gear slots in my opinion. And this mod says 10% less damage per item equipped. It cares about the items your character has equipped, not the Merc's items. So for me, I was unequipping 2 rings. I think these are the items that are worth unequipping. Technically, you could probably make the argument for unequipping a belt, but I didn't want to rebalance my attributes to make everything fit again. It just sounded like a chore that I didn't want to deal with. I thought just with 20% damage being dealt in the Blasted Monolith, that would still be enough to clear, and it was. Now, speaking of the belt, I want to mention it because it would actually be one of the ways to push the armor stacks Merc's damage to the moon, or like higher than what I have here, which is actually putting back on Center of Benevolence. The reason being is flasks are insane for armor stackers. If you've ever seen an armor stacker, you know their mandatory piece for the build even starting to work is a Mage Blood. And that's because Basalt and Stibnite are massive multipliers. They multiply into each other. You multiply the evasion, then it gets transformed to armor, and then you multiply the armor again. Also, we were a bit under the crit cap, where Diamond Flask would also help. And then suffixes like increased armor, increased evasion, increased crit chance. All those things would be nice damage multipliers and increases to this mercenary. Again, I was lazy about balancing the attributes, but if you really want to push this mercenary's damage to the highest extent, this is something I would consider. Now, another thing with this character you may notice, and let's talk, because we're still talking about flasks right now, is we have Soul Rippers, and we have a Quicksilver Flask, and we have Balbala, my favorite timeless keystone. The reason for this is, number one is, you could do it with Center of Benevolence to get 100% uptime on these sorts of flasks here to ensure high multipliers to the Merc's damage, which I think this is honestly the best way to go if you want to push single target. Or B, what I used it for, which is good Val Haste uptime. I use Soul Rippers plus Val Haste. Val Haste, when I proc, is another about 100 attack speed, which is a huge damage multiplier. And these flasks, I can use to proc Val Haste. The idea is, I proc Val Haste, it is on, then it turns off, then I have Soul Gain Prevention, then it ends, then I can pop another flask and trigger Val Haste again. And then as you clear maps, you're getting souls, and then also you're getting souls refilled from the Balbala flask. Obviously, it's not 100% uptime without like having any supplemental kills, but if you get any supplemental kills to the flask, it'll charge up faster, and you can proc Val Haste again. That's what I'm using it for. I do think if you want to try hard this more for higher damage, the Censure is the way to go over this, but this is feels good as well. And you could even do a combination where you, let's say you don't do the Diamond Flask, but you do 1 Soul Ripper plus a Basalt plus a Stibnite, something like that. You could also additionally, no, I was scratch that. I was about to say you could consider using a like Flask Gain mod, but Aura Effect and Grace Aura Effect are way too important on the body armor, so scratch that. But point is, Center of Benevolence, Trader, it has some value in either Val Haste uptime or the more multipliers on armor and crit chance, stuff like that. Now let's talk about a bit about the character when it comes to making an armor stack Merc, and how is this Merc getting to such high armor? It has to do with aura scaling. Any armor stacker is just an aura stacker in like 2 aura stackers in a trench coat, essentially. The reason being is Grace and Determination are huge multipliers to evasion and huge multipliers to evasion. Like, for example, if I were to turn off my Determination, you'll notice the Mercenary's armor all of a sudden goes from, what was 1 million to 400K. And then if I, let's say, turn off Grace, oh, what's that? Oh, now he has 1/10 the armor. So between these two auras, we are over 10xing the armor amount on the Merc. And that's because aura effect is insane. Now, one thing I want to take note of, excuse me. One thing I want to take note about this is aura effect for being a Merc bot is not the same as being an aura stacker, in that things like introspection and the aura node, which says aura has 10% the mastery here, these things don't work for a Merc bot because they say specifically increased aura effect on you, and that is you, the character alone. It does not apply to members in your party. It doesn't apply to the Merc you're linked to. So anything like introspection scaling or this mastery or a few different sources, they do not function for scaling your aura effect. So it's very, very specific that your aura effect nodes you're getting that are scaling this to work is the thing that just says from your skills, and it doesn't say on you specifically. I ended up getting this all the way to 200 aura effect, which I think is pretty close to the maximum of increased aura effect, just generic, that you can get. And I'll go over the sources. Number one is I have a brutal restraint. I didn't just use this for the Balbala jewel, although you may think that. I actually originally looked at this jewel because it's one of the highest aura effects you can get on a timeless in the game, because it has this node right here, 8% aura effect. And I have that actually 5 times. I have it here, 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 and here. Now, this was a pretty rough passive investment, but I think combining it with being one of the highest aura effects you can get in the game and using the Trader Keystone, I think this is fairly worth, especially if you consider this flask right here, which I wish I had balanced the attributes for, because I do think it's a pretty strict damage upgrade over what I'm currently doing. Next up, besides the 40 aura effect from the jewel, we have aura effect from things like our nodes on the tree. We have 10% on the notable, 6% here, that's 16. We have 12% here, that takes us to 28. We have another 12% here, that takes us to 40. We have another 6% here, that takes us to 46. Another 20 here, that takes us to 66. That's like nodes that are throughout our tree. So we have 40% from this jewel area. Then we have around 66% from the nodes across just the tree. Then additionally, on top of that, you have things like your items, which provide aura effect. Things like your body armor implicit provides 20%. You can roll Eldritch implicits on to items. We have 14% here. You can roll aura effect on your shield. Technically, you could get the unique synth helmet still with 15 aura effect. But that I don't think is worth overusing a helmet like this, which has a bunch of gem levels on it per se. But that would be another source of aura effect if you really wanted to get the maximum amount. So things like that, 14, 10, 20, 44 aura effect there. I forget what number we're at. But anyways, that's one way to get some aura effect as well. And then last but not least, one of the biggest aura items in the game, Hand of Pharisha. Increase aura effect from your skills while you have a linked target. And auras only apply to you and linked targets. This is important for 2 reasons. Number one is it's a boatload of aura effect. But number 2 is it allows you to use the treachery tattoo without the downside. Because these gloves limit the aura to only applying to you and the target you're linked to, treachery aura doesn't give the enemy my purity of elements. It doesn't give them the purity of fire. I'm not making them tankier because this limits that. So it gives you a free 15% reservation. It doesn't stop there, though. It doesn't only give you 48 aura effect. This is actually kind of pretty cheeky and I think hilarious as well. But you can use Runegraft of the Bound to get another 20% multiplier on this aura effect here, which makes it go to like, I don't know, 57, 20%. No, it might be 56. I don't know. Anyways, point is, it's another like 8 or 7 aura effect there from the Bound. So between all these sources, I have just barely over 200 aura effect on my character, which meets the breakpoint for a few things. Number one, it means every single aura I have is giving 6% attack speed from the Necromancer Jewel from the Scion. So, for example, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 auras, which is giving 54 attack speed. You could also go for the Champion Aura Jewels, or if you want easier reservation space, you could go for the Guardian Aura Jewels, but you will lose some attack speed, but those are some of the options you have for the Forbidden Flesh and Forbidden Flame. Aside from the aura scaling, we also care about base damage. Now, we have flat damage from Anger, which is about, this multiplied by 3 is around 800-ish flat damage. But that's not really enough in my opinion. I'd rather have double that. And Flame Link with levels on it gives another 700 to 800 flat damage right here between the base damage of the skill, and obviously it's also including 5% of my life. I don't have a ton of life on this character, but 5% of 2,500 is still, 125 or whatever it is. It's still a decent amount of flat. It's still considerable, and the Flame Link is then doubling the base damage our Merc is getting. But it's not just double because we are doing the light radius. Now, this, again, I want to stress, I think it might actually be a bit better to go unique amulet, unique helmet, especially on more of a budget, and especially if you are not necessarily trying to force the return proj. If you want to force the return proj in open areas, then I think you need the quad anoint to pull it off. You need the additional Vengeance Cascade and like a ballistics on top of the long shot anoint we already have, on top of the glove special mod, on top of the proj speed on chant, and on top of the unveil node, if you want consistency in those return projes. So that's kind of what's going on there for the base damage. Then our attack speed is obviously through haste, Necromancer Jewel. The Mercenary has a bunch of attack speed on every Abyss Jewel through attack speed if you crit recently and attack speed, as well as we are also running a Tech Rods with 4 Murderous Eyes, which is 160% crit chance there. Now, you may notice that previously I had 5 Abyssal Sockets, and I have what appear to be a rare pair of boots or an elder version of Dark Rays. Why am I wearing these? And this is the crux of making an armor stack Merc work with Combatant, and that is a combination of these 2 items. Precursor's Emblem says you have Iron Reflexes while at max Frenzies. This needs you to have max Frenzies somewhere. You can get this via making the Merc have minimum Frenzies. There is a minimum Frenzy mod. You can get this on the Vestigial of a Ralakesh transformed into another unique pair of boots. You can corrupt that pair of boots to be rare, and then the Merc can wear it without requiring a unique item investment. One thing I should note about this is you could also potentially, if you corrupt it into a Hunter base, you could use Tainted Exalts and roll until you hit Tailwind. Well, that's a really min-max thing. I corrupted about 7 rare pairs. I made a bunch of +3 minimum boots, and I never hit Hunter. But that's the one thing you could do to make these boots even more valuable, is putting Tailwind on them that way. But it's very expensive to do with Tainted Exalts. Never touch these boots with Tainted Chaos, by the way. Tainted Chaos will just turn the item to a normal item, and you can't make it back to rare. Only Tainted Exalts if you're going to try to craft a corrupted rare like this, but that is how we're getting max Frenzies for Iron Reflexes. The other way you can get Iron Reflexes is via the... It's either the Belltimber Blade or it's the other one, which I'm forgetting. But it's one of those Elder boss swords. One of them gives Iron Reflexes while stationary and point blank and +2 proj. That sword is very good for the Molten Strike, Armor Stack Mercs, Blade Biter, and Smolder Strike. So if you want to go that route, that is one of the ways you could do it. But for Combatant, I would recommend doing a Precursor's Emblem. Combatant is also a much better clear Merc, where Frostblades hits a ton of enemies all at once and can go with Chain. Part of the reason I chose Combatant is for Blasted Monolith. It is a DPS plus clear speed check. The thing is, you have all these magic Union of Souls mobs, and if you have a Frostblades with Chain, every time the Merc hits, he doesn't hit just one enemy. He hits 10 enemies 3 times with the chains. But it's not just that. You can get additional strikes on this Pinnacle mod, non-strikes, 4 additional targets, which means every time my Merc's sitting in a pack of like 40 monsters, he's hitting, 5 times 10 times 3. He's hitting like 150 times per attack. So it's a huge multiplier on your collective DPS you're doing in terms of like your clear DPS. And that's why I chose this Merc for specifically beating Blasted Monolith. For overall highest single target, the answer still might be something like the Blade Biter or the Smolder Strike with the Molten Strike abilities, but I chose this specifically for the use case of beating Blasted Monolith. And the change would be Nimbus plus that Iron Reflex Sword if you're doing the Molten Strike Mercs. Okay, so that's going over a bit of the talking points about the concept for beating Blasted Monolith. Obviously, we're still using the enmities, we're still doing the fire scaling, As for the tree itself, getting the reservation space was probably one of the biggest tasks for this character. Originally, I started out testing. I wanted to do an ivory plus the strength ES mod hand of Phorecia gloves. The problem with this is it spread my character too thin. I couldn't quite get enough reservation space, and I couldn't get enough aura scaling. When I initially had swapped to that setup, my armor Merc had actually, like, I believe it was half this amount of armor. And on top of having half that amount of armor, I was still giving a similar amount of flat fire as I was here. My flame link was more effective, but I made up for that loss of that higher power flame link with a higher power anger that I could now fit in reservation wise. The thing is, this reservation is horrendously expensive to get. Number one is you need a bunch of like 35 small reservation clusters. Number two is I have Awaken and Enlighten not once, not twice. I have it three times. That's how excruciatingly painful it was for me to fit this reservation. Now, some of this is some greed where I didn't really need it that much. I could have done Awaken 4 and Lighten here and then just lost like 2 levels on the Vitality. It wouldn't have been the end of the world. This was more just, I was just wasting money to waste money. Whatever, sure. But as for fitting these reservations, the point I'm trying to make here is it is painful. You're going to have to make some sacrifices in order to fit auras if you want to do this and you want to do it without Awaken 5 Enlightens. Sacrifices like you might have to give up your Necromancer jewels. You might have to give up, maybe you'll give up some of your aura effect and not hit the break point for 200 aura effect. You're going to have to give up something. The reservations to get this all to fit is painful. Maybe you give up your spell block and that's how you fit it. You get rid of 25% reservation fear and then all of a sudden you only need Enlightened 4s. Whatever it is, you're going to have to give up something. Reservation space was obnoxious on this character. And it's largely what took me so long to put this character together because I was farming a lot of currency to be able to buy these Awaken 5 Enlightens, and it just added up price after price. But, of course, all things can be done to some level of balance. Doing things like taking out Tempest Shield, losing some defensive power, dropping some levels of vitality, all of a sudden, all these Enlightened 5s can be Enlightened 4s. And, you know, you made some sacrifices, but you also saved yourself, you know, a couple of mirrors of cost investment in the character, stuff like that. Awakened in power could be Enlightened in power, or could be just a level 4 in power or a level 3 in power. You get what I'm saying is, when it comes to if you want to cut costs in this character, start with the Awakened gems. They're ridiculously expensive for the most minutia of upgrades. And that's where I would start. Obviously, I was trying to min-max. I wanted to go in, and I didn't want to try multiple times. I wanted to succeed the first time on Blasted Monolith, so I overgeared, overprepared more than I probably needed to beat the map. So, that's some of the takeaway of the character in terms of gear cost and aura effect scaling. Now let's talk in terms of just about gem level priority and what I was doing here. So, on our character, obviously, we want to push fire res, and we want to push armor scaling. So the armor scaling was via grace and determination. Our Merc is also wearing a chest piece that says I get evasion increase for cold res. So the question is, how do we get the max amount of cold res via aura scaling without considering Untouched Soul to begin with? And that was via using things like quality and gem levels. So on this Purity of Ice, you'll notice it's giving up to 93 cold res. That's way more cold res than you would normally get at baseline. And this is due to quality scaling. If you look at my Purity of Ice, you'll see that there's plus 56 from supports and plus 10 from the socketed color. That alone accounts for roughly, I believe, 33 res, because every single quality is 2 res. So like if I take out this enhance, for example, boom, there's 20 res gone. And that, keep in mind, that 20 res is scaled by my 200 aura effect. So that's giving the Merc 60 cold res just from enhance. So the combination that we did here is we added Eclipse, which gives quality. We have Enhance, which gives quality. And we put it in the socket that gives quality. And I used a chest piece that had +1 dex gem to give quality to the Enhance, as well as give a level to the Purity of Ice. So we're doing things like this to force the res up. And we're also doing the same thing with Purity of Elements, because Purity of Elements also scales res from quality. Not as effective as the Purity of Ice, as it does 1 res per every 4 quality, but it also provides res to fire res, so it's kind of like doubly effective because fire res is important for the Enmity's fire pen. So that's what's going on here. That's this setup where we have Purity Fire, Purity of Ice, basically supported by, and Purity of Element supported by Eclipse and Enhance. Is we're forcing the quality up to provide a bunch of res for the overcap res mod and for the Enmity's Fire Pen. Keep in mind, Enmity's Fire Pen, if you do the unique Untouched Soul plus this res scaling, you'll more reasonably cap and you'll be just kind of chilling. So something to keep in mind, but that's the value in forcing on these quality pieces to these auras. Another thing I want to take note of is if you want to look at putting rings on the build. I obviously was making this whole setup to do Blasted Monolith. That's why I didn't bother putting rings on my character. But things you want to consider is if you're doing Light Radius node is grab Light Radius. If you're not doing Light Radius, if you're doing the unique helmet, unique amulet, then you would do something else, obviously. But you can do things like Venters for reservation efficiency. You can do things like the Delve mod onto a Manifold ring, where you can get reflected increased life reservation efficiency if you want to try to fit a better aura setup on your arrogance, stuff like that. All in all, rings don't have a ton of value for this build, I would say, because it's like you have attributes, you have reservation efficiency, you have a bunch of stuff that doesn't really give too much in terms of multiplier power to the combatant. That's why they're the weakest slots. That's why I gave them up. But things like fixing your attributes or making your reservation space easier, that is another way you can save a lot of currency. And all of a sudden, you get some Venters with reservation efficiency, and these Enlightened 5s become Enlightened 3s. Stuff like that saves you a lot of money. I was not considering the budget, and I was considering not using rings at all, but just something to consider. You can also go for, like, let's say, rings with like corrupted endurance charge if you want to go for more tank, and you could do a ring with a socket that has and put endurance cry on there. Stuff like that can add more tank to your character. Another thing I want to take note of is you may notice down here I have a Topaz Flask, a Purity of Lightning, a Battle Mage's Cry, and an Enduring. This was specifically for doing the Blasted Monolith. I like having like a Quicksilver so I can walk around faster, but for Blasted Monolith, I wanted to have a bit better max res because you'll notice I'm not using Purity of Lightning. I made the judgment call that I think Tempest Shield is better for my character defensively, especially doing the Feared where most of the damage from Feared is spells. So I decided I'd rather run Tempest Shield instead of Purity of Lightning, which meant I was 90 max fire, 90 max cold, and then I had regular lightning. So this took me up to, the 80 lightning res, as well as it helped get my armor to around, I believe, 30k. I don't have the aura effect for my gloves, so this isn't the correct armor amount. Obviously, when we're in zone, the Flame Link will proc, and then we'll have the aura effect from the gloves. You get what I'm saying, though. Anyways, so that's the idea of what was going on there. And then for Blasted Monolith specifically, I was using Battle Mage's Cry instead of, I think, like Frostblink, just to proc 2.5 base crit. That, between Assassin's Mark, Battle Mage's Cry, my Merc's base crit, the Tech Rod's Gaze, power charges, and the crit annoyance, our Merc actually ended up having a fairly good crit chance. We were also running Brittle Ground for another 2 base crit, so you'd run under the enemy. That's another 2 base crit. Between those sources, you're looking at, 4.5, 1.5. You're looking at 11 base crits. And then power charges, crit chance on Tech Rod, stuff like that. I think our Merc was in the 50 to 75 base crit range, maybe a little bit higher. Something like that is how we were able to get fairly effective crit chance. So we could still take advantage of doubling our base damage with Flame Link without needing to do something cheeky like a Destructive Link to try to adjust the base crit. Oh, wait, we also have Precision. No, our Merc was actually like 80 to 100% crit chance, actually. Because I forgot, Precision's like another 200% crit chance I wasn't even factoring in. So yeah, our Merc was actually pretty close to crit cap. So if you're thinking you need Destructive Link, I would say keep in mind Flame Link literally doubles your base damage. And you can get crit chance in other ways, like things like Brittle, like things like Battle Mage's Cry, like things like Assassin's Mark, power charges if you really need it. Okay, so yeah. I think that covers most of the character about what we were doing. Is there anything more that I'm forgetting about? We were running Light of Meaning for ES scaling, Unnatural Instinct for some block movement speed, Rational Doctrine for regen. Our regen source, let me go ahead and find a zone to see what regen we're at. Our regen amount is 2,300. And then if we had the Flask proc, we were around 2,800. So we had a bunch of regen, and we had 50-40 block with Recover on block. That was kind of our sustain sources. For a character that doesn't have like Leech or life gain on hits, stuff like that. You want to make sure you have good regen or recoup or recover on block. You need sources like that for the sustain to feel good. So for us, that was Vitality, Rational Doctrine. I think I had like the regen mastery over here, stuff like that. You can also, if you want to like go less regen, you could also go higher spell block. That was an option I considered as well as a decent option if you want, but just something to consider. You know, on top of that, you know, maybe you could even go Ghost Dance if you really wanted to. That would be kind of pathing out another like 3 points or something like that. But 40k evasion with Ghost Dance can feel quite good as well. So it's something to consider in terms of like your defensive layers on the character. As for crafting the gear, let me just see if I can run down these real quick. Okay, so helmet, fracture mana reservation efficiency, and then use an essence of, sorry, not essence, a fossil combination of corroded, glyphic, faceted. What this does is it gives you high likelihood to hit +2 aura from the glyphic. And then the faceted, you're just kind of rolling whether or not you want plus strength for getting a level on anger or plus int for a level on enlighten to make your reservation space easier. Ultimately, plus strength will give you the highest scaling late game. This is something I didn't quite figure out. But for example, if I really wanted to min-max damage, let's say I gave up Tempest Shield. I don't even know if this is reservation space is going to work. But let's say I was able to do something like this where I gave up the Tempest Shield. Let's see if I can even fit the reservations for this. It looks like I can. If I fit the reservation space for this, your grace gets way higher levels, your anger gets higher levels, which means you're getting more base damage from your aura effect here and more base evasion. Stuff like that you can do. You're obviously giving up your defenses when you do stuff like this, but that's where +1 strength becomes more powerful because it gives you a level to the empower, as well as giving a level to the anger, and then it gets, you know, kind of double value there. Something to consider. I couldn't quite get the reservation space to work, but we could have dropped some of our defensives if we wanted to even push damage further. That's kind of your options there. +1 strength for more power through empower if you want to try to somehow fit the reservation space for that, or +1 int if you want reservation space to be easier. And then after that, stuff can be changed. Veiled Chaos, block physical damage reduction focus mod, unveil AoE, and then use the boat all flame slams. Try to annul save with Eldritch Annuls, and then repeat this process until you have +2 AoE with either T1% ES or T1 flat ES is what I went for. So that's the helmet craft. The shield craft is a beast lock crafting method where you get a shield that has aura effect and strands. On a magic base, you do the lock, and then you check a bunch of shaper shields until you get reservation plus recover on block. I have a video on Beast Lock method. I showcasing a simplex craft, but you can use this on a lot of gear pieces, and that's how we did the suffixes. We then did Bristle Matron, prefix crafting, suffix can be changed, scour, block, mana, slam, rinse, repeat. And once you get a T1 mod you want, then use the boat all flame to try to slam another good T1 mod. That was for the shield crafting. As for the body armor crafting, watch my chess piece craft for the Merc bot on how to transfer breach mods, but it's basically transferring a breach mod, fracturing that breach mod, and then it was a faceted fossil craft to get dex plus int, specifically to level up the enlighten, as well as to level up the enhance, and then, you know, purity of elements and purity of ice also benefited from those plus levels. That was the chess piece craft. The amulet craft is a roll until you hit +1 all, and I would recommend doing this with strands. So put strands in the item, then make it magic, then regal it, then do reforge something like fire. Just cycle a reforge that's cheap until you hit +1 all. Then there is a Phenomenal Plagued Arachnid imprint craft that works on the talismans. Imprint annul until you just have +1 all isolated. Multi-mod, previous can't be changed, cannot roll attack, augment fire, that'll give you +1 fire. Then do previous can't be changed, imprint, reforge defense. Imprint, reforge defense. Imprint, reforge defense till you hit T1 ES. And then you should still have strands on the item from earlier. That would allow you to go previous can't be changed, imprints, slam, scour, block, slam, remove mod, slam, annul. If you miss the annul one of your prefixes, go back to the imprint, rinse and repeat until you hit T1 all attributes. Then you do imprint crafting with previous can't be changed with veiled exalts until you get your unveil to be the hybrid attribute. Then you do imprints plus slams. There's a lot of imprints with this, but you can basically force exactly the mods you want on the amulet, and that's what we did here. Obviously, to start the base off with, you would need to do the Eldritch mod until you hit Aura Effect, which is pretty expensive to do, but that's kind of the idea there. I think that covers most of the items for crafting. Belts, I guess. Belt was I think it was an Essence craft until it had T1 Strength, and then a Reforge attribute, which is like a 50-50 between percent attribute, T1 and T2. And then after you get suffixes, it was a Bristle Matron craft plus All Flame Boat whenever you hit a T1 mod, slamming to try to get the second T1 mod. That's the idea there. I wouldn't even necessarily recommend this belt. I would actually recommend doing a Center of Benevolence in your late game setup. I actually think that's maybe better, but it would require you to fix your attributes elsewhere. Tomato, tomato. I don't know where I'm going with this. So that covers most of the gear crafting, I think. Jewel mods, I'd recommend PDR, Determination, and Chaos Res. Outside of that, things like Discipline Regen, Precision Attack Speed for quality life moving around, Discipline Spell Block, Discipline Recover Energy Shield, Determination Crit Reduction, Determination flat armor is okay. Stuff like that I would look at for your Watcher's Eye mods, stuff that helps you defensively as the player. And then, the last craft I haven't covered, which is Small Cluster Jewels. I actually went for Fractured Mana Regen, and the reason I wanted Mana Regenerate on a lot of these things is it was to cover the cost of our Flame Link while still being able to have enough Mana Regen left over, to sustain my other skills. So I'd actually recommend this Mana Regen was intentional. It wasn't a bug or a brick or anything like that. I actually wanted this Mana Regen. This allows you to not have to run Clarity, which would take up another gem socket and create more socket pressure. So yeah. And that was Reforged Defense and then Boat Slams trying to hit on effect, stuff like that. So that covers, I think, all the gear pieces and the idea of the Armor Stack Merc. I guess I can finish with giving you guys a showcase of, we can just do an arbitrary T17 just to give you guys of what this looks like while going through like a mapping scenario, and then we'll do a quick Uber to showcase doing an Uber, I guess. And that's probably going to call it for the Mercbot run. I have other builds I want to make. We finished our goal. I will be doing more Mercbot testing going into the next league, because like I think Mercbot's insane, and I think it's absolutely one of the best build archetypes in the game, and I want to update it for next league so that way when it comes around next league start time and you find, let's say, a Cruel Mistress, we'll know, and I'll try to record some data on what mercs are actually worth and good to use, not just let's say the mercs that what's the word? Not just the mercs that, like, I only knew Many Shot was good going in this league. Well, I knew a couple were good. I was like, hey, I think Combatan's good. I think Many Shot's good. I think Kineticist is good. But we didn't really know like what other mercs would be really good options, and I want to detail that out so that way there's way less RNG for people where they can get a few different mercs. Like, instead of looking for 1 out of 20 mercs, you're looking for 10 out of 20. So it's a way higher likelihood that you reset the zone a couple times and boom, you get a decent one that can work. So I'm going to do some testing pre-next league for that, but I'm not going to worry about that right now because I want to play other builds. That'll be prior to the next league launch where we'll do a bunch of freaking like testing on various mercs for league starters and stuff like that. So anyways, that's what a T17 looked like. I don't know if it had tank mods. Maybe it did. Doesn't really matter. The merc's damage is just like completely unfair. And we'll go ahead and get a Devourer, and we'll grab a Nimbus real quick. Quick Nimbus for the road. Don't mind if we do. One thing I want to say about the Mercbot is this is a very, very high investment version of the Mercbot. The Armor Stack Mercbot is. You can just get along just fine starting out with a regular, more Flame Link setup. This is more if you want to min-max and start taking this character into doing DPS checks like the Blasted Monolith to try to like farm currency. That's like the difference in what we're doing here. So hopefully that makes sense. Probably don't want to die to drowning. Ooh. take a Cobalt Jewel. What do we got? Anything good? Anything good? Conviction. Okay. This is a really good node. However, is it valuable to the current economy? I don't think a lot of people are playing Templars, so my guess is no. But survey says 1 divine. Okay, it's not that valuable. It is a really good ascendancy point, but yeah, Templars are not very high play rate, and if you have a class that isn't currently being played a lot, they're even if they have good nodes like this, they're not worth a lot. So anyways, that's what it looked like doing an Uber Eater on the current setup. Granted, if you wanted to push more DPS, Battle Mage's Cry I think gets you basically to crit cap. Instead of doing Frostblink, that's what we did for like Blasted Monolith DPS pushing. So yeah. Okay. I think that covers everything about the armor stack swap. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. If you want to start taking the character to doing DPS checks like Blasted Monolith, this is a way you can do that. Oh, another thing I guess I can cover is gem links on the Merc bot itself. You want Static Strike as a second ability, so that way you prioritize Frostblades. I like Frostblades because it's really good clear value, like I talked about earlier for Blasted Monolith. And for the clear value, you want Chain and you want Return, and then additional supports like Hypothermia, Ellie with attacks, faster attacks, multi-strike, stuff like that are very strong. Additional things like Dash and Frostblink, they aren't as much of a brick as we originally thought. Movement skills in general, it seems like GGG helped patch the Merc's AI so they use movement skills a lot less and mostly just use them to get between packs, which is a lot more useful. So keep in mind, the more things that are important is just making sure the secondary skill is a skill that doesn't compete with the main skill for doing damage, and then getting good damage links on the main skill. So that's kind of the stuff that that changes there. Anyways, this was the update to showcasing how to do a armor stack Merc. I will, of course, have updates for the POB and the page on the Mobalytics if you want to look at these new gear sets. And yeah, hopefully you guys enjoyed. As always, thanks for watching, Exiles. Take care and peace out. Have a good one.